Welcome to our next video on transportation presented by the Brain Injury Association of Maryland. This is part of the series on the independent living skills training. So before we get started, we just want to review what is transportation and what we're covering in these series of videos. So we're specifically talking about either public transportation or paratransit services. So public transportation is buses, trains, subways, and other forms of transportation that charge fares, run on fixed routes, and are available to the public. Paratransit services are public transportation services available to those with disabilities who may be unable to ride the regular public transit services. So as long as you have public transportation available in your area, paratransit services have to be available by law. In this series, our transportation, we did a video on how to get and use a bus pass, which I recommend watching either right before this video or right after, because the strategies and skills in there are going to be really helpful in terms of using public transportation. This video is going to specifically focus on taking the bus and other public transit. We have one more video on using paratransit services. So if you're not interested in taking the regular public bus from a bus stop, I would suggest moving on to using paratransit services video. If you're not sure what kind of transportation is the best for you, I would recommend watching all of the videos, and based on that information, you can decide maybe what's going to work best for you within your skills and supports that you have available. So we're going to work on the skills for riding public transportation using the Goal Plan Do Review worksheet, which if you've watched any of the other videos will start to become familiar by now. This is the simplified version of the Goal Plan Do Review sheet. On this page is the more detailed version of the Goal Plan Do Review, and this is the one we're going to use to frame the video. But if this one seems a little overwhelming or complicated, you can certainly use the simplified version. That clock down at the bottom left, and I will show it again, will pop up at every point in the video where it might be a good time to pause the video and do the step that's just been instructed. So you can use this video to practice skills as it goes along. You may decide it's more helpful to watch the video once than try the steps all at one time, especially for riding the bus. You can't necessarily watch a video while riding the bus. But this will give you a chance to prepare yourself and walk through the steps in order to feel more comfortable with that. So now we're going to talk about the skills for riding the bus. So if you haven't already, you want to get out those Goal Plan Do Review sheets. And the first thing we're going to do is write down what is the goal? What do you want to accomplish by watching this video and using public transportation? So take a minute and write down what those goals are for yourself. You might decide that your goal is to ride the bus independently, or to be able to go out to appointments or run errands as needed. Next, I want you to take a moment and think about how you're going to accomplish the goal of riding the bus, riding public transportation. So write down some steps that you think it would take in order to be able to ride the bus. The steps that we're going to cover in this video are getting your bus pass or having your fare ready, looking at the bus route and the bus stops close to you, gather up the items you need for your trip, finding the right bus stop, waiting for the bus, getting on the bus and paying your fare, finding a seat, signaling for your stop, getting off at your stop, and returning back home. So if you missed a few steps in here, you can definitely pause to write out the steps for yourself. Next, we're going to think about the materials and equipment that you need in order to be able to ride the bus. So take a moment and write down what you think you might need in order to ride the bus. So you'll definitely need bus pass or money. You'll need directions to where you're going. And the directions we're going to kind of go over different ways to get directions. So now you're going to think about, if I were to plan out a trip and ride the bus, how well would I do with this task from 1 to 10? 1 is not well at all, and 10 is almost perfect. And thinking about how much will I get done, or how much will I be able to do? So take a moment on your sheet and fill out the prediction piece. Now we're going to go through the steps needed in order to ride the bus. And like I mentioned earlier, with this video in particular, it might be a little hard to watch the video while you're trying to do the task of riding the bus. So it might be helpful to go through and practice some of the skills that you can at home, or to pause the video and get yourself ready, but knowing that you're going to have to watch the video all the way through and then plan out a bus trip. So the first thing you're going to do is get your bus pass or your fare ready. So you may decide that you're going to use a bus pass. If you have a monthly bus pass, you want to make sure that you have one that is up to date and accurate for the month that you have. So you may need to get a new one or upload a new one to your phone each month. And the steps to be able to do that are in the Getting a Bus Pass video that goes along with this series. You may also decide to use a preloaded card, such as a Charm card. So before you leave, if you're using the Charm card, check your balance to make sure that you have enough money on it to cover your trip. And finally, if you don't have a bus pass or you're not going to use a bus pass, making sure you have the right amount of money in cash or coins to ride the bus. So you want to make sure that you have enough, but you also want to make sure that you don't have big bills. You don't want to be able to pay your bus fare using a $20 bill, because you won't necessarily get the change back that you need for that. All right, so take a moment now, and if you haven't figured out how you're going to pay your bus fare, talk with your support person or think about what's going to be the best way for me to be able to pay to ride the bus. And you may have to pause the video and go through the steps to get a bus pass or load up your card if that's the option that you choose. Next, you are going to want to look up your bus route and stops, and I'm going to go through 3 different ways to do that. All of these are using the computer or your phone, which is right now the easiest way to figure out how to ride the bus. There's also the option to get printed bus maps, which sometimes can be a little bit confusing, but you do have to go to a stop or a station, such as a metro station, in order to get that information. You can also look at those online, but they don't necessarily give you step-by-step instructions. So I would recommend using one of these 3, unless you have somebody who knows and can tell you exactly the steps that you need to take to get to where you want to go. So the first one we're going to talk about is using Google Maps. You can use Google Maps on your phone or your computer. So you want to either open it on your phone or using the app, or on your computer. Next, at the very top, you're going to enter in your address. In this example, the address is 3327 Chestnut Avenue in Baltimore. Next, you enter the address to where you're going. In this example, we're going to go to the Giant Food on 1020 West 41st Street. And then we'll pick the route that we want to take. So this might be a certain bus number. And the reason why you might pick one route over the other is perhaps the bus stop is closer to you, or the bus stop that you get off at last is closer to where you're going. So you might minimize the walking. The other option is you might pick a bus route that runs more frequently. Maybe the buses come every 15 minutes instead of every half an hour. So there's a few things to consider. Sometimes it's pretty much the same, and it's just that there are a couple buses that run along the same routes that you need to go. In this example, bus routes number 21 and 94, which are up at the very top there, both of them will go where we need to go and pick up at the same stops. And this shows you below that the different stops and directions that you need to take in order to get to the Giant Food from Chestnut Ave. So it says 33rd Street and Chestnut Ave, which is the intersection of where the bus stop is. Then this tells you the bus number to get on, the 94 bus, which is heading towards Sinai Hospital. And then it tells you each of the stops where the bus is going to stop at. So it will stop at Chestnut Ave and 34th Street, 36th and Chestnut, 36th and Roland, 36th and Falls, Falls Road and 37th Street, Falls Road and Morling Ave, and then the last button in that line, which is printed larger and a little bit more bold, says Falls Road and 41st Street. And that's the stop that you're going to get off at. And after that, you'll walk the rest of the way. If you're using Google Maps on the computer, you can actually print out the directions to take them with you. And the directions are actually even a little bit more simplified than what's shown here when they're printed out. You can also choose to print pictures or the words or both. So whatever might be a little bit easier for you to follow. If you're on your phone in the app, you can actually hit start when you're ready to go, and the directions will update as you go along for your trip. So you can kind of follow along where you're going. So if you think Google Maps might be a good option for you, I would suggest pausing the video here now and practicing the steps to using Google Maps to get from where you live to a location that you might have to go to. This could be a grocery store nearby or an appointment that you have to go to, but practice the steps in getting comfortable and looking up the address. Next, you could also use the MTA Maryland website. This actually functions pretty similarly to the Google Maps. So you'll open mta.maryland.gov/trip planner on your computer. So this one is one you have to use on the computer. Then you'll enter in your address. You can see there, 3327 Chestnut Ave. And then you'll enter the address that you're going, the Giant Food on West 41st Street. And just like Google Maps, it'll bring up some options on the route that you could take. So it brought up the same options, Route 21 or Route 94. Whoops. So that shows you all the steps one by one. And then here, it shows you what those directions will look like once you select the route. So in this case, maybe we selected bus route number 21. So it tells you you need to walk to 33rd Street and Chestnut Ave. And then at 33rd and Chestnut Ave, you're going to get on the 21 bus that goes towards the Woodbury Light Rail Station. There, you're going to ride the bus until you get to 41st Street and Hickory and get off at the stop there. And it tells you to walk the rest of the way to where you're going. Just like Google Maps, when you're on the computer, you can actually print their directions to take them with you. So if you think that MTA Maryland website might be a useful tool for you, and the one benefit is that it's simplified and it only uses Maryland bus routes. And so it may be a little more accurate than Google Maps in terms of when the buses are coming and what those locations are. You also may just find it easier to use. So I would suggest if you're not sure, you can always try out both and see which one you like better. Okay, now there's another app that you can use on your phone called the Transit app. And it has that, you can find it in your app store, and it has that green little symbol on the left there. So you'll download the app, and then you're going to open the Transit app on your phone. You'll enter in your address, which again, 3327 Chestnut Ave here. And then you're going to enter the address where you're going, 1020 West 41st Street, which is again that Giant Food store that we're going to. And then you'll pick the route that you want to take. In this app, it's suggesting the 21 bus again. So we'll select that route. And this is what it will show up like when you've picked that particular route. It's kind of nice in this version. It's a little bit easier to see the route and the directions that you're going. It shows you in the little circles at the top each stop that you'll stop at before you get to where you're going. And then it tells the directions down below, which is, you might notice, look very similar to the Google Maps and the Maryland Transit website. But again, it says the number 21 bus, and it says to the Woodbury Light Rail Station. So that's telling you the stop, the very last stop of the route. So when the bus pulls up to the stop, it will actually say at the top of it, not the next stop it's going to, but the very last stop on the route. For the 21 bus, that's the Woodbury Light Rail Station. This information is important because it helps you know that you're getting on the bus going in the right direction. Most buses run two directions, sort of back and forth between two stops. So you want to make sure that you're getting on the one that's going in the direction that you want to go. And just like the other apps here, it shows you the different stops that you're going to be going through before you get to the stop that you want to get to. The nice thing about this is that you can keep the Transit app open while you're traveling, and it will actually update you on the bus arrival and the directions that you need to take. So if the bus is running maybe 15 minutes late, the Transit app will tell you that you might have to wait a little bit longer. It'll also update you on the directions as you hit each stop. So it's kind of reassuring to know that you're going the directions that you need to be going. So just like the other apps, I would recommend pausing here and practicing to see how you like using the app, again, to go somewhere that you may plan to be going or that you regularly go, and see how easy it is for you to enter in the information and how easy it is for you to follow the directions that they have up. Because if you're going to use this to find your way, you want to make sure that it is done in a way that makes sense to you. And then before you leave, you want to make sure that you have anything you might need for your trip. So some important things to bring with you might be your wallet and your ID card, your money or your bus pass, the directions. Right now, you have to definitely bring a mask with you in order to ride the bus and to go into most places. You may also want to bring your phone. This is especially important if you're going to be using your phone for directions. Your keys so that you can get back into your house when you get home, and anything you need for your trip. So if you're going to an appointment, you might want to bring any paperwork you have with you. If you're going grocery shopping, your list. So anything that's going to help make the trip a little bit easier and for you to be able to do what you need to do when you get to your destination. If you have a lot of things, it may be helpful to bring everything in a bag. So you might choose to use a purse or a backpack just to keep everything together on the bus so you're not trying to keep track of too much. So if you're getting ready to ride the bus, I would pause the video here and gather up and just make sure that you have everything that you need to leave the house in one easy spot, and take a look and see, do I need a bag? Do I have enough pockets for all of this? Am I ready to go and to manage all of these items once I'm getting on the bus? So if you're ready to ride the bus, we're going to have our directions in hand, and we're going to find our right bus stop here. So the directions that we're using say to find the number 21 bus towards the Woodbury Light Rail Station. Looking at the picture of the bus stop here, you're going to match the numbers for the bus route to your directions. So this sign here has the 21 bus and the 94 bus. We know that we found potentially the right bus stop because it has the same number of the route that we're going to take. So our directions say the 21 bus, and this sign says 21. And then you're going to walk to the nearest bus or transit stop to go on your way. And then you're going to double check the signs to make sure you're going the right direction. And that's where it will tell you a few more details. So we're going to look at this a little bit further. If you're heading somewhere for the first time, and especially if it's somewhere where you need to be on time, like going to an appointment or an interview or a meeting, then it might be helpful to practice walking to the bus stop a day ahead of time, just to make sure you feel comfortable about getting there and you know your way, especially if it's not really, really close to your house. So we're going to look at this bus stop to make sure that we're going the right direction and a little bit more detail here. So again, if we're going to that giant grocery store, we're taking the number 21 bus towards the Woodbury Light Rail Station. So we're going to make sure that our bus number and the end stop match the directions that we have. So the number 21 bus headed towards the Woodbury Light Rail Station. Now you might notice that both of these pictures show the number 21, right? But the words next to the number are a little bit different. The one on the left says Canton Crossing next to the 21. The one on the right says Woodbury next to the number 21. So if we're headed, we'll say that again. So Canton Crossing, number 21 there, and then Woodbury for bus number 21 there. So if we're heading on bus 21s towards the Woodbury Light Rail Station, take a moment and decide whether or not the one on the left or the one on the right is the correct bus stop. So the one on the left says it's going to Canton Crossing. That's the end stop. We do not want to get on that bus because it's going in the opposite direction to where we want to go. The one on the right that says Woodbury is the bus stop that we want to wait at because the name next to the number is the same one that's on our directions. These bus stops will be opposite sides of the street from each other. So it's important once you walk up to the stop to double check, because you might be on the wrong side of the street just because of how you walked up to your location. So always double check. It will save you a lot of trouble to make sure that you're on the right bus. If you're absolutely not sure, when the bus comes, you can always ask the driver to make sure that it's going towards where you want to go. Next, once you find the right bus stop, you'll need to wait for the bus. Not all bus stops look the same. So you might have the one on the top here, which is obviously newer and there's better protection, there's more seating. Those are a little bit more comfortable to wait at, but that's definitely not how they look everywhere. They may look like the stop on the bottom where there's just the sign and the bench. They may also just be a sign on the sidewalk. There's not necessarily always a bench there for waiting. So some things you want to consider before you're waiting for the bus. Just know that the buses may not arrive exactly at the scheduled time. So your directions might say the bus is supposed to come at 3:20 p.m., but if it's 3:20 and the bus isn't there yet, you didn't necessarily miss it. It may just be running late. Buses get affected by traffic. So if there's heavy traffic somewhere, they're definitely not going to be able to make it on time. So just be ready to wait. If you start to feel agitated or impatient, sometimes people like to have headphones to listen to music or podcast. You just want to make sure that they're not so loud that you can't hear what's going on around you, but sometimes it can be nice to sort of drown out some of the extra noise or traffic noise, especially if that bothers you. Since not all stops or benches have coverings, stops have benches or coverings, be prepared for the weather. You might decide that you need to bring an umbrella. And if you need a seat or a mobility device, make sure to bring it with you. So you might decide to use a cane that folds up that has a seat on it. You might decide to bring a rollator if you have one so that you can sit and wait for the bus. And then make sure that you're dressed appropriately for the weather. So bringing an umbrella, making sure you have a warm enough jacket on in the wintertime. Also in the summertime, making sure you have a bottle of water with you, especially if there's not shade, so that you can stay hydrated and cool if needed. So next we're going to watch a short video about boarding the bus.
Welcome aboard NCO.
So there's a few helpful tips that came up in this video. So you can see that this particular writer was using cash. So once he paid his cash to the bus, it popped up with his bus ticket to be able to use. If you have a bus pass that's already prepaid, you don't have to go through that step, and you can just show the bus driver your bus pass when you get on the bus. So you might see that the bus driver started moving before the person was done with that and sitting down. So again, if you have some balance issues or mobility issues, it might be a little easier to use a bus pass and prepay it ahead of time, just so that might not happen to you. And then the person moved to the back to find their seat. So when you're finding a seat on the bus, especially if you have difficulty with mobility or you're worried about being able to get off the bus stop on time, try to find a seat near the doors if possible. If the bus is crowded, try to move away from the door once you have paid your fare. So they often don't want, you'll see the yellow line there, they don't want passengers standing in front of that yellow line for safety issues. So it's important that you move back. And you can try to find a seat near the rear doors. If you're someone who needs the disability seats that you can show there, the accommodated seating, whether or not you need to fold them up because you have a wheelchair or you need to be closer to the bus driver, you can always ask for assistance if you need an accessible seat and not one open. If everybody who's in the accessible seats needs the accessible seats, it might be a little harder to find one. But if somebody sitting there doesn't need one, you can ask the bus driver, and they don't offer it to you, you can ask the bus driver for help. So when it's time to get off at your stop, so if you're using your directions and we saw, we needed to get off at Falls Road and 41st Street. So you're paying attention to that. The bus will announce the upcoming stops either on a visual sign or overhead. If the bus is crowded or noisy, it can be a little bit hard to listen. So you definitely want to pay attention. When it is time for you to get off at the stop, you can push the yellow strip that's located near most windows and seats. This actually tells the bus driver that somebody wants to get off at the next stop and makes sure that they stop. If it's a bus route where a lot of people get on and off at every stop, they might automatically stop, but it's still okay to signal just to make sure that the bus stops where you need to. The next thing you're going to do is get ready and get off at your bus stop. So you want to make sure to double check. Double check to make sure that you have everything that you brought with you on the bus, whether that's a bag or a cane or an umbrella. Double check, look left, look right, and make sure you have everything you need. When you exit the bus, it's easiest usually to exit through the back door, especially because then if somebody's trying to get on the bus quickly, you don't have to try to navigate around them. During COVID-19, most buses are requiring people to exit through the back door. You're going to look around. Once you're off at the bus stop, look around to become familiar with where you are. You might look at the sign, you might look for some familiar landmarks. This is going to be helpful for when you're trying to come back home. And then you're going to follow your directions the rest of the way to your destination. So getting back home, once you finished your errand or your appointment, you're going to use the same steps that you used to get to your destination. So you may open up the Transit app or the Google Maps app to find your directions back to your bus stop. You may also have printed your directions. So if you're going somewhere, actually this is an important note, to make sure that you print your directions both going to the destination and getting home, because those end bus route names are going to be different. It's going to help you get off at the right stop. And then you'll repeat the steps for paying your fare and riding the bus. If you bought an all-day pass, so like the gentleman on the video who paid cash and got his all-day pass, you'll be able to use the same pass for getting on the bus. If you have a monthly pass or a weekly pass, you'll just have to show your pass again, just like you did on your first ride. And if you're using a charm card, you do the same thing. You just want to make sure before you leave the house that you have enough money for both rides that you're going to need to take. So that's a lot of steps for riding the bus. So I would encourage you to go through and practice each of the steps. And again, you might have to practice them a little bit individually, uploading your fare, maybe practice walking to the bus stop a couple times, and then practice riding the bus. And it might be easiest to do that practice with somebody for the first time. But after you do that, after you do a practice bus ride or you use the bus to get somewhere you need to go, come back to your goal plan do review sheet here and fill out the last part of it. What problems did you find and what solutions did you find in riding the bus? You can pause the video and fill out that worksheet if you have just ridden the bus. And then review overall, how did it go, right? From 1 to 10, how well did my bus ride go? And think about what worked and what didn't work. So for example, you might decide what worked really well was to have my fare prepaid so that I didn't have to worry about having the right amount of money. What didn't work, maybe you tried using the Google Maps app on your phone and not printing the directions, and it was hard to follow and hard to use. And you might decide next time you're just going to print your directions. And make a list of things that you can try differently next time to make it a little easier. So if you've ridden the bus, pause for a moment and use those, reflect on that process and identify some strategies. Next, I'm just going to offer a few tips for writing. So one is that if you're nervous about traveling, like we mentioned, practice each step before taking the trip all at once. Practice finding and reading your directions, practice finding the bus stop, practice with someone riding the bus maybe for the first time, finding your way back home. Do it in little steps. You don't necessarily have to try to do everything all at once. Have your bus pass or money to ride easily accessible. You don't want to get on the bus and then have to open up your wallet and dig through your wallet to find what you need. You might want to keep it in a place that's easy to get to. If there's a front zipper or front pocket of your wallet or your jacket, you might decide to keep it there so that you can easily and quickly stash your fare or your bus pass in and out. Keep your belongings all together and try not to set them down. It can be tempting if you have a bag of everything to set that bag next to you on the seat on the bus, especially if there's space, but you definitely don't want to forget it. So if you feel like you might be likely to forget it, keep it on your lap while you're writing, or loop your arm through a strap so that when you stand up, you have to take it with you. But do try to keep everything in a rolling bag or cart if you have a lot of stuff. If you're bringing along a water bottle, appointment information, your wallet, your keys, you don't want to have all that stuff loose in your hand. So it should either all fit in your pockets or in a bag so that you don't lose it. So this has been the video on riding public transportation. Like I mentioned, you might be deciding what type of transit is going to work best for you. If this seemed really overwhelming to you or like you might not be able to manage it, you may want to consider paratransit options, which is going to be our next video. You can also review that video. And if those steps seem a little bit easier for you, you can definitely start the process to access that resource.